Just about everyone who plays games has that one game that they wish did better. Whether that means better marketing, better sales, better reception, or whatever else that could have helped it either have more staying power in the public consciousness, or pushed it along enough to earn a sequel, or at least a spiritual successor. For me, that game is Sleeping Dogs, an open-world action game focused on elements of a criminal underworld that isn't GTA or Saints Row. United Front Games began developing this title under Activision Blizzard, which did what Activision Blizzard does best and ruined everything it touched, canceling the project in 2011 when it was fairly close to completion. But it wasn't over yet. This game defied all odds and got its publishing rights bought by Square Enix after they dug around in their couch cushions for some loose change. And so the newly titled Sleeping Dogs was released to the public in 2012 to generally favorable reviews and was lauded as a failure by the publisher, who believes 1.5 million sales within 2 months of release just doesn't cut it. Due to the terrible tragedy of not printing all the money in the world, the future of Sleeping Dogs was cut tragically short as the sequel was cancelled in the early stages of development. And we'll probably never see anything from the series again, unless the movie adaptation starring Donnie Yen actually comes out, and doesn't fall into the endless pit of regrettable and forgettable video game movie adaptations. Given the state of the world and said endless pit, let's call that unlikely. I love this game, and I believe it deserved better. It is far from perfect, sure, but I still think there is more than enough good in it to warrant better treatment than being left to rot on virtual storefronts, so that people will see it when it goes on sale and say, "Huh, that looks kind of familiar," as they continue to idly browse past it while trying to find something to fill the void in their heart where love should be. But what is this game really? Well, despite the title, it's not a game about catnapping canines, though going to sleep is an objective more often than you might expect. But rather a game about our main man Wei Shen, a Hong Kong police officer who goes undercover to try taking down key members of the Sun On Yee triad from within. What follows is an adventure full of betrayal, tragedy, conflicted loyalties, tropes, and over-the-top action, as Wei goes out of his way to break pretty much every single rule in place for undercover police operations. Sleeping Dogs plays like a classic Hong Kong action flick, and I adore it. Many characters are pretty standard archetypes, many twists are fairly predictable, and often the narrative is at odds with the gameplay. But it is still pure unbridled fun, if you ask me. Which you didn't, but it's my video, so I'm going to pretend someone out there actually wants to hear me rant about another game that's over 8 years old now. The gameplay is very reminiscent of GTA and other similarly structured games. Get objective, go from point A to point B, get distracted along the way, meet characters and do quests for them to advance the plot, or just bungle around with side content and free roaming for a while. Biggest difference between this and other games in the genre is that its combat focus is much more on melee rather than on guns and other weapons. While most games that follow this formula usually give you a pitiful series of punches and kicks, if they let you melee at all, Sleeping Dogs has an almost Arkham Asylum style of combat. You have to string together combos, counters, grapples, and use environmental attacks to get the edge on encounters where you are almost always outnumbered. Overall, it feels really good once you've gotten used to it, and it's significantly more interesting than melee options in other games in this vein. Though it can definitely be argued that it falters in other areas comparatively. The arsenal of weapons available in-game is significantly smaller than pretty much every other action game like this, which can make some of the shooting sections feel pretty limiting. Weapons are also much more difficult to get a hold of, and you can only carry around one at any given time. So this means your freedom for causing destruction and mayhem is nowhere near as strong as other sandboxes. This also means the repetition of certain mission types can be felt more strongly than in its contemporaries. That said, as long as you aren't doing every single side mission of the same type in succession, I don't think it gets repetitive to the point of being boring at any point. By dividing my time between main missions, side missions, and going after collectibles, I have never found myself bored by repetition in any of my numerous playthroughs. A big part of what keeps me entertained no matter how many times I play through this game is the setting itself. United Front did a fantastic job of bringing Hong Kong to life. Not a fictionalized satirical version of the city like you might find in other games of this genre, but as faithful a recreation of it as they could manage. And that really sets it apart from some of the bigger names out there. It's not based off Los Angeles, it's not a knockoff Detroit, it's honest to God Hong Kong, and it's yours to explore. Everything from the street markets of North Point to the busy streets of Central, and from the rapidly gentrifying Kennedy Town to the floating village in Aberdeen Harbor is recreated as best as possible. And none of it is off limits. Right from the start, you can go anywhere on the map, with only very small, mostly indoor areas left closed off for story missions. This makes it so much more immersive than almost any other open world game I have ever played. There's no advertisements for Pisswasser all over the place, or violent cat mascots, or super-powered beanie-wearing douchebags to take me out of the world or to try forcing out a cheap laugh. Even when it's at its most ridiculous points, Sleeping Dogs still feels very grounded in reality. Which I really appreciate because I think this game does a great job of acting as a bridge between Eastern and Western themes and cultural differences and similarities. You see, I'm an American, but my grandmother is Japanese, so I'm close enough to my Japanese heritage to get quite a lot of things about Asian cultures that many of my peers here in the West might not be as familiar with. And I will be the first to say that if you aren't familiar with Japanese culture and humor, then heavily Japanese-oriented games like Yakuza can feel very Japanese to Westerners. But that tends to be the kind of games that make their way over to the West most often. Games set in other Asian countries like China, Vietnam, and Korea tend to either use the location as a backdrop or as a firing range. Or they westernize it as much as possible. I mean, games like Dynasty Warriors didn't even really try to properly pronounce Chinese names in English until like the 8th game in the main series.
Is there something wrong?
Cow.
And games that are set in or even acknowledge Hong Kong are even rarer, which is a shame because I believe it is a great setting for a game, as it can appeal to two halves of the world on a much broader scale. Due to its history as an English colony, Hong Kong has had a tremendous amount of Western influence on its culture, making it an almost perfect fusion of East and West. Meaning that while some elements present might be considered unusual for one side or the other, it's not completely alienating to either audience. Something that other games have severely struggled with in the past. I also think it's kind of a good idea to keep Hong Kong in the public consciousness as much as possible right now. Just saying, it's been a pretty crazy year and there's still some unresolved issues going on over there. Just something to keep in mind. But this duality is even present in the player character. Wei Shen is a Hong Kong native who moved to LA when he was young, and upon his return to HK he feels like an outsider, belonging to two worlds. Which is very much intentional, as his role as an undercover cop working his way up the triad ranks also delves into the idea of him needing to find out exactly where he belongs. So let's talk about Shen for a bit. Wei is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting video game protagonists, at least on a conceptual level. Growing up in Hong Kong, he fell into criminal activities pretty early on in life, and once he moved to the States, this continued up until his sister died of an overdose. Wanting to get back at the criminal elements that got her into drugs in the first place, Wei became a cop. And due to his reputation and connections from his previous life, he was a perfect candidate for undercover work. But his conviction for wanting to bring down those who have crossed him or have caused his loved ones harm, and his old habits as a thug make him a very volatile man who is more than willing to break the rules to get the people he's after. That's just fancy speak for saying Wei can be extremely violent. Like, I don't know, Wei, that seems a little unnecessary. Ugh, that could cripple him and causes damage to public property. What the fuck, Wei? That kills people. Jesus, Wei, calm down, man. Yeah, Wei really isn't a good guy. That's what's really interesting about him. He's not your typical perfect protagonist who's meant to be as likable as possible, but he's also not a completely heartless monster. You can understand his motivations, even if you can't always agree with his actions, which can be very, very questionable. Or just downright dickish. Like, if you want to 100% this game, or even just want to do all the side missions, you literally have to have Wei cheat on multiple girls. There's even a mission where you wiretap a phone because Wei is a huge hypocrite who gets pissy when one of the girls he is cheating on cheats on him. Not only is he breaking one of the biggest rules of an undercover operation by getting involved with these women, but he is actively using police equipment for personal reasons. All in all, not a great look. But he's still an interesting character to play as for this adventure. He's a charismatic guy with a sense of humor, but not to the point of being a constantly wisecracking jokester like Nathan Drake or countless other protagonists. You really get to see his flaws and the ugly underside of both the police and the criminal elements. And that's something else I like about this game. It's not afraid to show the worst sides of organized crime, and the lengths those in law enforcement can sometimes be willing to go for personal advancement. It doesn't pull punches, and I love that. Honestly, my biggest gripe is that Wei doesn't get arrested himself at the end after everything he did during his investigation. But hey, gotta get that happy ending somehow, yeah? But you see, even though Wei is kind of a piece of shit, he's at least a relatable piece of shit. He became a cop to take down criminals, and even though his methods fall a fair distance short of due process, he still does take down bad guys at the end of the day. He is deeply flawed, but he's still at least trying to stay on the right side of the law while going after his vendettas. That's something that you usually don't get in this genre. He just feels like he could be a real person, and that combined with the grounded setting makes for a game experience that I have never seen replicated anywhere else. But despite the grounded setting and the fairly believable characters, Sleeping Dogs never forgets that it is a game first and foremost. There are many elements here that are very gamey, such as ranking scores for missions as well as for certain activities that you can do while going around the world. You can replay missions to try to maximize your XP scores, or you can see how long you can drive a car at crazy high speeds without crashing just to see if you can top your personal best. It's stuff that aside from a few trophies or achievements has no real purpose other than to be fun goals for yourself. Wait a minute, did I say XP scores? That's right, this game even awards XP. 3 different kinds. You have Cop, Triad, and Face scores, each of which unlocks completely separate abilities as you level them up. Cop XP is earned by doing missions as cleanly as possible. Each mission starts with full Cop score, but it drains whenever you do something like hurt civilians, mess up during free running, or damage property. I don't usually do very well with this one. But that's okay because in the Definitive Edition, there are plenty of cop jobs you can do to boost Cop XP, which you want because ranking up can net you nice goodies like finding weapons in cop cars and the ability to steal cars quickly and quietly. You know, things officers of the law do. Triad XP is earned by performing well during the action of missions. Pulling off certain moves in combat, taking out enemies in different ways, shooting out tires, and even just fast-talking your way through the sections that don't have much combat. It rewards varied actions, meaning you can't just do the same exact attacks and earn max XP. Boosting your Triad level unlocks new attacks, damage reduction, and other combat-focused skills. The third XP is your Face level, This is basically how well known Wei is as a gangster, and it can be bumped up by doing numerous different miscellaneous missions like favors and races. Gaining face levels improves your face meter, which fills during combat, and once full gives you a bunch of advantages that help turn the tides when you're in a tussle. It also unlocks tons of different perks, like better status buffs, a valet who will bring you a vehicle anywhere you are, discounts, and my personal favorite, the ability to wear nicer clothes. That's right, you have to earn the right to dress nicely. Starting out, you have a very limited wardrobe, mostly only being able to buy cheap knockoffs and basic gangbanger attire. But as you gain levels, you can start to dress in fresher, more stylish outfits. The best part? The outfits aren't just cosmetic. If you put together clothing from matching sets, you can get different perks that can affect gameplay in numerous ways. Boosting melee damage, increased XP scores for each kind of XP, better prices when buying vehicles, and that's just the normal outfits. There are also special bonus outfits that are included in the Definitive Edition that are inspired by real-world Asian organized crime groups, are homages to different action flicks, as well as tons of outfits that are references to or are ripped straight out of other properties, most of which grant bonuses based on what they're borrowed from. For example, Agent 47's suit grants you his signature silver baller handgun, and dressing like Sun Wukong gives you a motorcycle that has a perpetual cloud surrounding it. The outfits are hands down one of my favorite elements to this game, as it gives you an incentive to actually track down and try out every article of clothing you can find, rather than just buying one or two outfits over the course of the game and never changing again. Some of my personal favorite outfits are the Adam Jensen, the Rico Rodriguez, the 2020, and Jackie Chan's outfit from Drunken Master. And the best part is that your outfits persist through cutscenes, so you can look as ridiculous as you want, as long as the game doesn't have a set outfit for the mission you're on. There's just so much to this game in particular that I love, and I wish the US at least had given it more of a chance when it first came out. But look, I can admit Sleeping Dogs is not perfect. The gameplay can get a bit repetitive. Character models can look kind of rough, especially in the overworld where they look like blow-up dolls with slightly less personality. And the ludonarrative dissonance is very strong here. But at the end of the day, this is still my favorite game in this genre, even beating out Saints Row III and GTA 5 and San Andreas, all of which I love dearly. Something about this title just ticks all the right boxes for me. The immersive world that pulls me in, the Hong Kong cinema influence that it wears on its sleeve, the pure, simple fun of it. Everything just works together in a way that I adore, and I will always consider this the series that didn't get the chance it truly deserved. I really believe that if United Front had been able to make the sequel they wanted to, it could have smoothed over so many of the faults that were present here and been an absolutely fantastic game. But alas, it seems Square Enix is more than happy to let Sleeping Dogs lie. And there's a pretty good chance that this one is down for good. But you can still play this game. I mean, come on. The Definitive Edition goes for like a max of $20 when it's not on sale, and pocket change when it is. At least consider giving it a try.
What is this? What are you doing? You're going to pay for this. My husband is a cop. He's going to hunt you down. You never get out of jail.
Wonderful!